Okay, with our lesson this morning, Joseph and Pharaoh, Genesis chapter 21. Now, one of the things that I've asked you to do as we walk through these series of lessons is I want you to sort of put yourself in Joseph's shoes. It's easy for us today. We know the rest of the story. We know, Joseph, you're going to save your people, okay? Joseph doesn't know that. He does not have a clue what tomorrow holds. And so today we're going to learn some lessons. The central truth of our lesson this morning is that God gives wisdom and understanding to his followers. So you and I can expect the Lord to give us understanding. This understanding is separate from the world. And that understanding, that wisdom, a wisdom for compassion, and to know that God is able to work good things out even from bad situations. And so that's what our takeaway from our lesson today is. Our key verse is verse number 42 of chapter 41. God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. There's an expression, bloom where you are planted. Bloom where you are planted. Every one of us, if I were to go around, and there are times in our lives, you may have had to go someplace, do something that you really didn't want to do. If you had your preference, you would be and do something else. But because of circumstance, you are where you are, or you were where you were. And God is able to use us no matter where we are. And that's what Joseph is saying here. God's caused me to be fruitful. So we want to see how God blessed and rewarded Joseph after he suffered in prison. He was falsely accused of trying to force himself on Potiphar's wife. Now, being a guy, being myself, knowing who I am, that's the last thing that I would ever do, is try to force myself on somebody. It's not who I am. I don't have that kind of personality. Beth and I, we like watching older movies. We like watching mysteries and stuff. And there's a character in movies, and you have seen him 1,000 times. He goes by a million different names. We call him a greasy old man. Now, he's not always old, all right? But we say, that guy is so greasy, how does he not slide off the screen? And he's talking, and these women are eating up the candy that he's putting out there. You know what I'm saying? Like a dog eating a treat from someone's hand. They're just fawning all over him. We're going, that guy is trouble. He's just sleazy, okay? And but that's part of the movie. All right? If you don't have him, then you just miss a whole part of the movie. But here, Joseph's falsely accused. He's imprisoned. That being said, there's a character in the news today. You may have heard the name Russell Brand. Have you heard that name, Russell Brand? He's a comedian, okay? He's an actor. And in the last 4 years or so, roughly 4 or 5 years, I don't know that he's come to the Lord, but he's getting close, all right? He has stopped running around. He got married, seriously married. He's been married several times, but the marriages were disgusting. and he was disgusting. He was a comedian, and his jokes and stuff, they were dirty jokes, terrible. And the world loved him. The media loved him. Hollywood loved him. When he would do a show, okay, like he would come to the Portland Expo, or you come to a nightclub, and there would be literally thousands of people in the audience. His staff would go through the audience before, okay, and he would ask them they would approach what looked like groups of single women, and they would ask them, would you like to party with Russell? Okay? Now, when we say party, you know what we are talking about, right? You're all adults. You know it's not good partying, right? Okay. And women would throw themselves at his feet. Okay? He did this for decades. And Hollywood loved him. They couldn't get enough of him. All right? 4 years ago, he cleaned up his act. He's talking about, I'll say things that the church approves. We shouldn't be killing babies. You shouldn't run around. You shouldn't do drugs and all that stuff. So he's talking about all this stuff. And in the last month, we've had 4 women that have all come forward, and they all tell the same story. How that he forced himself on them. And it's all the same story. Well, can anybody smell a rat? Okay? You don't all come, 4 different women don't all come in and tell the same story. That's not going to happen. Okay. So it's amazing how that he cleans up his act, and now the world wants to destroy him. When he was behaving in a debauchery way, they loved him. Oh, okay. All right. So we want to see the presence of the Spirit of God was seen in Joseph's life, how the Lord was with him. See how Joseph kept God in focus during his time of challenge. He kept his eyes on the Lord. He didn't lose sight of the Lord. And so, why do we study a lesson like this? For this point, look for ways to do the same in your life. Wouldn't it be nice if I were to say to you this morning, you're never going to have another trial in your life? Wouldn't that be great? You're never going to have another test in your life. Yeah. The mail, when you open up the mail, your mail is going to be full of money. Your bills are going to be automatically paid. No one's ever going to, there's never going to be a potter's wife to try to tempt you to do something you shouldn't do. You're never going to be, okay, all right, that would be great. But we know that the last test has not come. And until we depart this world, we're going to have tests and trials. Question 2. God had chosen the family of Abraham to be a witness to the world. And God said, you will be my people, and I will be your God. This indicates the relationship they would have with God. So that's a relationship that we are having with the Lord. He's our God. We are his people. And God promised he would live among them. And he's really living among us today because he's in our heart. In heaven, in the New Jerusalem, he will live in among his people. And that recalls the idyllic relationship that God had with Adam and Eve, that he came down and he walked and talked with them. Okay, question number 3. Pharaoh had disturbing dreams. We've talked about dreams in connection with Joseph already. Remember, I had a dream about the sun and the moon and the stars. I had a dream about sheaves of wheat. Pharaoh has some dreams. So after his dreams, the wise men were called in, and they were stumped. They didn't have a clue. Now in that, there's a part of me that is curious. Why didn't they just make something up? He says, I have a dream. Interpret the dream. Why didn't they just make it up? Anyone? Worthless. Yeah. If you said, this means A, and tomorrow this is going to happen, what happens when tomorrow comes and it doesn't happen? That's exactly right. Their life wouldn't be worth anything. Now, remember that at this period of time, and it would continue literally for hundreds of years, that pharaohs, emperors, they were thought to be the embodiment of their God. In other words, if they came to power, people kind of figured that God was blessing them. Now, not that they were God, though some of them acted like gods. If you're the wise men, if you're the magicians, you need to be careful, because if you really believe that Pharaoh is divine and you're messing with him, that expression, God will get you for that? Well, they were really afraid of that. Now, at first, Joseph had been sold to an officer of Pharaoh's palace guard. After being falsely accused, what happens to him? He's thrown in jail. He thinks he's being thrown out of the frying pan into the fire. But we, on this side of it, he's not going to get in a position to interpret Pharaoh's dream until he gets in jail. So there are times that God may direct us to a certain place so that something else good may happen. So we don't know for how long Joseph was in jail before the next chapter of his life began. We don't know exactly. But God prospered Joseph. He became the director of the prison. The guy that was in charge of it, Joseph proved himself so before this man that he put him in charge of the whole prison. The Lord's favor was with him. God was helping him. Okay, question number 4. Pharaoh's 2 dreams contain some important details. We'll look at the details through these next questions. Now, the Nile River was the source of Egypt's power, the source of their fertility, their prosperity, and life. Where they are, when the rains came a couple times during the year, the Nile would flood, and then it would go back into its channel, but it left the ground fertile. All you had to do was scratch it with your foot. The water table wasn't very low, it wasn't very high, scratch it with your foot, throw some seeds in the ground, throw some dirt back over it, and boom, it was great. Egypt would later be known as the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. Okay, so with that kind of prosperity comes power and wealth. Now, the cow, we're going to see cows in the dreams. Okay, the cow was uniquely a symbol of Egypt itself, as well as a representation of at least one of its gods. So the cow was held as sacred. That means Pharaoh's dreams focused on two things: Egyptian life and focused on power. And in addition to that, Egyptians considered the number 7 to be significant, the same way that Christians do. We see the number 7 as representative of the Lord. Okay, we see it representative of sacred things. In 7 days, God created the heavens and the earth. 7 is God's number. In the book of Revelation, we see 7 vials, we see 7 bowls, we see 7 trumpets. Okay, that number is repeated in Scripture. So, question number 5. When Pharaoh wakes up the next morning, he calls for his key advisors. He calls for the magicians and the soothsayers and the seers. Now, these individuals had shown themselves to possess great insight. They had been trained in the mysterious supernatural arts of the day. We should not underestimate the power of the devil, okay? The devil has real power. Now, he doesn't have power over Christians. Doesn't have, the devil only has power what we give him. Okay? So he doesn't have any power over you. So when people give themselves over to the enemy, there's wicked things that can happen. Now, Pharaoh hoped that if he could not interpret these dreams, then perhaps these men could offer understanding. So he calls them in for them to help him with this. Now, unfortunately for Pharaoh, the scripture says not one of them could tell him what they meant. They didn't know what these dreams were all about. Now, in verses 9 to 13 of chapter 41, Joseph's not forgotten anymore. Okay, for a couple of years he's been forgotten. Pharaoh's cupbearer, and you remember when Joseph was in prison, 2 men came into the prison. They were suspected of conspiring against the Pharaoh, and they both had dreams, and they were upset about them. And Joseph said, "Dreams are of the Lord. Tell me what you dreamed." And so the cook, the baker, he told his dream, and so Joseph said, "Well, your dream means that prepare to meet your God, because your head's going to be lifted off your shoulders. The cupbearer," he said, "not many days, you're going to be restored to your position." And so Joseph said to him, "When you come back, when you get out of here, remember me." Okay? Remember me when you get out of here. And he sadly had forgotten Joseph after being released from prison, despite having promised to help him. Sometimes we are forgotten. Sometimes people forget us. Not that we've ever forgotten anybody else, right? Not that I've ever forgotten something. No, that happens. All right. I find myself writing more and more notes all the time. Look at my phone, go in the notes section. I got lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of notes. 2 years had passed before he remembered Joseph. 2 years went by. I wonder if Joseph, every day when he got up, I wonder if he wondered, is this the day that he remembers me? Is this the day he remembers me? Is this the... 2 years. He probably stopped asking that. But God had not forgotten Joseph. God does not forget us. So, when Pharaoh began to fret over his troubling dreams, Joseph again enters the picture. Suddenly, Joseph becomes important. Now, Joseph insists that the interpretations to dreams belong to the Lord. He's going to tell Pharaoh that. So, the cupbearer, he related his experience with Joseph. Now, remember, the Egyptians and the ancients, they put a lot of weight in dreams. A lot of weight. Pharaoh believes that the divine is trying to communicate something to him. Well, in this case, it really is. The divine, God is trying to communicate something to him. God is trying to speak to him. So, Pharaoh, when he learns from the cupbearer, and now the Pharaoh would remember anybody who tried to assassinate him. He would remember that. Just like we remember assassinations, right? We remember, who killed Abraham Lincoln. All right? We remember, who killed JFK. Okay, we remember those assassinations. Bobby Kennedy. All right, with those things, assassinations. And so Pharaoh, this was an attempt on his life. He would have remembered the baker was found out to be part of that conspiracy, and the cupbearer was shown to be innocent. Now, the easy thing would have been to put both of them to death. That would have been the easy thing. And so, but Pharaoh really wanted two things. He wanted to find out who was conspiring against him, and he wanted to find out who was being loyal. Now, both of those things are important. So he would remember what that incident entailed. Now, when Joseph is presented at court, he's not presented as a prisoner, but he's presented as a free man. In other words, they get him. He changes his clothes. He takes, I almost said he takes a bath, but he probably had to take 2 baths from being in the jail. You've probably seen pictures of ancient Egyptians, how that they had their face shaved and they had their hair shaved in a certain way, and they have that like a ponytail. Remember, you see those pictures? So they probably shaved him up and made him look really presentable. Maybe put some Old Spice on, He's been there for a while. And they bring him in. So Pharaoh explains the situation. And Joseph stated that only God can provide the answer. Now, when he says only God, remember that Pharaoh considers himself close to being a god. So when he says only God can interpret that, Pharaoh believes he has this close relationship with his God. So he's got, he's all ears to Joseph. Of course, when Joseph is talking about God, it's not ISIS, it's not, Osiris, it's not one of those gods. Joseph's implication is clear. His God had given these dreams to Pharaoh. So only he could tell Pharaoh what they meant. And that's in verse number 16 of Genesis 40, 1. So Pharaoh says, I've never seen such sorry-looking animals in all the land of Egypt. Now, this indicated that Pharaoh was an eyewitness to what was happening in Egypt. If you say, I've never seen such sorry-looking animals, it means that he's seen other animals that looked okay, right? I mean, it means that he is in touch with his kingdom, all right? And he knows that there are no such ugly-looking cows in Egypt. And now, even though Pharaoh was assumed to have direct connection to the divine, he was powerless to intervene. He couldn't, in his dream, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't help. He could only watch as the scrawny cows ate up the healthy cows. So seven skinny, lean cows come up out of the river, and then 7 fat cows come up, and the skinny cows ate up the fat cows. So Joseph was quick and concise in his explanation. Each dream carried the same message. 2 different dreams. Fat, rich, prosperous things would be devoured by lean, withered, and sickly things. So, it's similar to Joseph. Remember, Joseph had, well, he may have had more, but he related 2 dreams in Scripture to his brothers. The first dream was the sheaves of wheat. His brother's sheaves of wheat bowed to his. Second dream, similar to the first. Sun and moon and the stars bowed to his star. Okay? The details were different, but the result was the same. And here, 2 different dreams for Pharaoh, but the same message. So Egypt would enjoy 7 years of prosperity, followed by 7 years of famine. Now, this came at a time when they were having bumper crops. It came as a time when there wasn't a famine. If you look out on the horizon, and the sky looks black. It looks that purple hue, sick green, and you see that. In your head, you're thinking, I think it might rain. I think we might get some rain. You know, we might get some wind out of this thing. That doesn't mean that you're a prophet. It only means that you have seen that kind of a sky before, and afterwards it rained. Okay. It's what's that? It's not rocket science. But here, there was no indication that there was going to be a famine. So the prosperity would quickly fade from memory. And that has a way of happening to all of us. When something bad happens, we'll just take something that's not really, really bad, but you have a flat tire, okay? Now, when was the last time you had a flat tire? Last week. You had a flat tire last week. Okay. Now, that's a great example, Mike. Now, before that, how long was it before that you had a flat tire? Years? Yeah. And so when we have something that comes up, we go, oh, man. But then when you stop and think about it, we don't have a flat tire every week or every month. And, a year ago, I had a flat tire. A guy in front of me, they must have been doing construction, taking windows out of houses, because on storm windows, how that the metal around them that holds the storm, and on the corners there's a L bracket that is in there, and this guy had a trailer, and he was heading for Percy's down on Marginal Way, and his trailer was full of those aluminum frames from windows. And he hit a bump on the highway, and a bunch of those flew out. And I could not get away from them. And I ran over one. And later on that morning, Beth and I were going to Vinny's. And as we're going, all of a sudden, I heard rubbing, and I felt the back of the car and I said, "We got a flat tire." I pulled over, and sure enough, one of the pieces from that little thing was in my tire. And it was right in the right place that they could repair it, which was really good because I'd only had the tires about a month. Now, I can't tell you the last time I had a flat tire. It was on my truck, years and years. So I'm glad I don't have a flat tire every year. Okay. But when something bad happens, then our mind does go back, to other negative things. That's just the way that human nature is. And so the way that these dreams come, how that the fat cows come up, they come up quickly. The lean cows, they come up quickly. So it's going to, and that indicates that when the bad stuff happens, the good stuff is going to be gone out of their memory. They're not thinking about the good times. So having two similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God, and He's going to soon make them happen. Egypt was soon to be in crisis, and there was no time to waste. Preparations needed to be made quickly and without delay. So it has to happen now. So in verses 33 to 36, Joseph gives some instructions to Pharaoh. Look at verse 33. "And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt." Now Joseph is brave making this suggestion. Does he suspect that Pharaoh might put him in charge? We don't know. Not necessarily. This is still wise advice, okay? He's given the interpretation that you're going to have 7 years of good, 7 years of famine. So a logical would be make preparations for it. This verse can be a continuation of the explanation of the dream. The dream is 7 years of good followed by 7 years of bad, but you draw a line under it. So what should you do about it? And so Joseph continues with that. It showed a logical solution to a grave problem. Okay? And Joseph, God has given him a clear understanding for this. Find someone wise to manage the work that needs to be done throughout Egypt. And then appoint supervisors throughout the kingdom to oversee storage of the 20% of the crops in each of the good years. So here is a great suggestion. Make sure the storage is guarded, okay? It's sad today, you just get something and people are devising ways of stealing it. Otherwise, this famine is going to destroy the land. That will be, if you don't do anything, you have to do something. He says it would ruin, in verse number 36, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. Okay, question number 11. Joseph is elevated in verses 37 to 46. Now, Pharaoh was pleased with Joseph's suggestions, but he recognized something special about Joseph. So he's connecting these two, the dream with Joseph, not just the interpretation, but the understanding. Can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? These words are surprising here, since an Egyptian Pharaoh himself viewed himself as deity, observed the Spirit of God in an enslaved Hebrew. So this is a great marvel. So this is what happens to Joseph. He's placed in charge of Pharaoh's court. All men will take orders from you. Only Pharaoh himself would outrank Joseph in all of Egypt. Joseph was dressed in royal attire, and he was given Pharaoh's signet ring and given new clothing and jewelry. People were instructed to kneel in reverence for him as he rode in his official chariot. This is verse 41 to 43. Now, Pharaoh gave Joseph a new name as well as a wife in verse number 45. That was common in ancient times when someone came into a different culture. They would often, the new culture would give them a new name. We know Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, we know them as their Chaldean, Babylonian names better than we do their Hebrew names. Okay, Daniel was given the name Belteshazzar. Okay, they gave him a new name. So that was a common thing that happened. It's not common about the wife thing. Okay, so he gets a wife. It's not he's not. We don't read that he's been married before. That marriage connects Joseph with the most powerful families in Egypt. His new name, this is a mouthful, Zephanath Paneah, meaning God speaks and lives. So, at this time, Joseph was 30 years old when he came into this new journey in his life. He had risen from enslavement to the highest ranks of Egypt in only 13 years. Now, such a trajectory was only possible through God's favor. It was not conniving, not scheming on his part. This was only through the Lord. Now, the part that Joseph had to play in all of that is Joseph had to remain true to the Lord in order to be in a position that God could use him to be where he is now. If Joseph had acted like, acted like the Egyptians, or if he'd acted like his brothers, he would not have been elevated like this. Okay? He'd not have been listening to the Lord. So God also stations us in various roles as he builds his kingdom. Sometimes our roles places us in lofty positions that may include status or even wealth. Joseph remembers the Lord in verses 47 to 57. Joseph inspected the land. He made preparations. And the abundance of grain was to the point where it was too much to measure. The storehouses kept getting full. He kept building more. They get full. Build more. They kept getting full. They're going to need it. So when the famine hit, they had enough. They had enough even for the surrounding nations. And then Joseph supervised the distribution of the stores. Okay, that's our lesson for today. And next week, Joseph is reunited with his brothers.